before skyscrapers pierced the clouds, before cities sprawled across continents, even before the first words were spoken into existence, there was us. But who were the first humans? Where did we come from? These questions have haunted humanity since we first developed the capacity for wonder, since we first looked up at the stars and asked ourselves how we came to be standing beneath them. Let's take a deep breath, because I'll tell you what happened. The story of human origins is not a simple tale with a clear beginning, middle, and end. It is a complex tapestry woven from millions of years of evolution, survival, adaptation, and transformation. It is a story that begins in the ancient landscapes of Africa, where our earliest ancestors first stood upright and gazed across the savannah, with eyes that would one day contemplate the mysteries of the universe. To understand where we came from, we must journey back through time, past the rise and fall of civilizations, past the invention of agriculture, past the mastery of fire, to a time when the world was populated by creatures that were almost human, but not quite. We must explore the fossil record, decipher the genetic code written in our DNA, and piece together the fragments of evidence that tell the remarkable story of how we became who we are today. This is not just a scientific inquiry, it is a deeply personal quest. Every human being alive today carries within their cells the genetic legacy of those first humans who walked out of Africa and spread across the globe. We are all connected by an unbroken chain of ancestry that stretches back hundreds of thousands of years to our common origins. Understanding where we came from helps us understand who we are and perhaps even where we are going. In the 19th century, when Charles Darwin introduced the revolutionary idea that humans had evolved from earlier life forms, the world was stunned. The concept challenged everything that people believed about their place in the natural order. If humans were not specially created, if we were instead the product of the same evolutionary processes that shaped all life on Earth, then what did that mean for our understanding of ourselves? Darwin's theory was brilliant, but it lacked concrete evidence. The fossil record of human evolution was virtually non-existent, leaving a gaping hole in the story of our origins. Scientists and the public alike became obsessed with finding what they called the missing link, a transitional form that would bridge the gap between our ape-like ancestors and modern humans. The search for this missing link would consume researchers for decades. They scoured the globe, digging through ancient sediments and exploring remote caves, hoping to uncover the bones that would prove Darwin's theory correct. The quest was not just scientific, it was deeply philosophical, touching on fundamental questions about human nature and our relationship to the rest of the animal kingdom. It wasn't until the 20th century that the bones began to emerge from the earth, telling their ancient stories. In 1924, Raymond Dart discovered the Tong child in South Africa, the first fossil evidence of an early human ancestor. This small skull, belonging to a young Australopithecus africanus, provided the first glimpse into our deep past, but it was just the beginning. The most famous discovery came in 1974, when Donald Johanson and his team were working in the Afar region of Ethiopia. They uncovered a remarkably complete skeleton of an early human ancestor, a female they nicknamed Lucy after the Beatles' song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. That was playing in their camp that night. Lucy belonged to the species Australopithecus afarensis, and her bones were over 3.2 million years old. Lucy was a revelation. She walked upright on two legs, a crucial step in human evolution, but her brain was still small, about the size of a chimpanzee. She stood about 3.5 feet tall and weighed perhaps 60 pounds. Her discovery provided concrete evidence that our ancestors had been walking upright for millions of years before their brains began to expand dramatically. But Lucy was not the beginning of humanity. She was a waypoint on a much longer journey. She represented a crucial transition, a species that had taken the first steps toward becoming human, but still retained many ape-like characteristics. Her pelvis was adapted for upright walking, but her arms were still long and powerful, suggesting she spent considerable time in the trees. She was our cousin, not our direct ancestor, but she showed us what the path to humanity looked like. The discovery of Lucy and other Australopithecus fossils revealed that the journey from ape to human was not a straight line but a complex branching tree. Multiple species of early human ancestors lived at the same time, each adapted to different environments and lifestyles. Some, like Lucy's species, thrived for millions of years before eventually going extinct. Others gave rise to new species that would continue the journey toward modern humanity. These early discoveries also revealed something profound about the nature of human evolution. The transition from ape to human did not happen all at once. Different human characteristics evolved at different times and rates. Upright walking came first, followed much later by brain expansion and tool use. This mosaic pattern of evolution meant that our ancestors went through a long period where they were neither fully ape nor fully human, but something uniquely their own. About 2.5 million years ago, a new chapter in the story of human evolution began with the emergence of the genus Homo. This was a pivotal moment, marking the transition from the earlier Australopithecus species to the lineage that would eventually lead to modern humans. The appearance of Homo represented not just an anatomical change, but a fundamental shift in behavior and capability that would set our ancestors apart from all other life forms on Earth. The first known species of our genus was Homo habilis, whose name means handy man. This designation was not chosen lightly. Homo habilis was the first of our ancestors to systematically manufacture and use stone tools, marking a revolutionary leap in cognitive ability and manual dexterity. These were not the sophisticated implements that would come later, but simple choppers and scrapers made by striking one stone against another to create sharp edges. Yet these crude tools represented something unprecedented in the history of life on Earth: the deliberate modification of the environment to serve specific purposes. The brain of Homo habilis was significantly larger than that of the measuring about 600 cubic centimeters compared to the 400 to 500 cubic centimeters of Lucy's species. This increase in brain size was accompanied by changes in brain structure, particularly in areas associated with tool use and possibly early forms of communication. The hands of Homo habilis also showed adaptations for precision grip, allowing for the fine motor control necessary for tool-making. But Homo habilis was just the beginning. Around 1.9 million years ago, a new species emerged that would prove to be one of the most successful in human evolutionary history. These early humans were taller and more robust than their predecessors. With brains that averaged about 900 cubic centimeters, they were the first of our ancestors to look truly human-like in their proportions. With long legs adapted for efficient walking and running across open landscapes, Homo erectus achieved something that no previous human species had accomplished. They became masters of fire. The controlled use of fire was perhaps the most transformative technology in human history. Fire provided warmth, extending the range of habitable environments. It offered protection from predators, turning the dangerous darkness of night into a safe haven. Most importantly, fire allowed for the cooking of food, which made nutrients more accessible and may have contributed to further brain growth. The mastery of fire also had profound social implications. Gathering around a fire created opportunities for extended social interaction, storytelling, and the sharing of knowledge. The hearth became the center of early human communities. a place where culture could develop and be transmitted from one generation to the next. In many ways, the controlled use of fire marked the beginning of human civilization. Homo erectus was also the first human species to migrate out of Africa in significant numbers. Beginning around 1.8 million years ago, groups of Homo erectus spread across Asia, reaching as far as the islands of Indonesia and the northern regions of China. They adapted to a wide range of environments, from tropical forests to temperate grasslands, demonstrating a flexibility that would become a hallmark of the human lineage. These early migrants were remarkably successful. Homo erectus populations thrived across Asia for over 1 million years, making them one of the longest surviving human species in history. Their fossils have been found from the Caucasus Mountains to Java, each population showing slight variations that reflected adaptation to local conditions while maintaining the core characteristics of the species. The success of Homo erectus revealed something important about human evolution. Recipients of evolutionary change, but active agents in shaping their own destiny. They didn't just adapt to environments. They modified environments to suit their needs. They created tools, controlled fire, built shelters, and developed social structures that allowed them to thrive in diverse and challenging conditions. During this period, the human brain continued to grow and reorganize. Archaeological evidence suggests that Homo erectus developed increasingly sophisticated tools, including the iconic hand axe, a teardrop-shaped implement that remained virtually unchanged for over 1 million years. The consistency of hand axe design across vast distances and time periods suggests that these early humans had developed standardized techniques for possibly indicating the emergence of teaching and cultural transmission. The world of Homo erectus was a world where multiple human species coexisted. While Homo erectus was spreading across Asia, other human species were evolving in Africa. This was not yet the time of human dominance. It was an era of experimentation, where different human lineages explored different evolutionary strategies and occupied different ecological niches. The story of human evolution is not a simple linear progression from primitive to modern. Instead, it is a complex branching tree with multiple species of humans living simultaneously across different parts of the world. During the Middle and Late Pleistocene epoch, roughly between 800,000 and 30,000 years ago, the Earth was populated by a remarkable diversity of human species, each adapted to their specific environments and each representing a different experiment in what it meant to be human. Perhaps the most famous of these ancient human cousins were the Neanderthals, scientifically known as Homo. Far from the brutish cavemen of popular imagination, Neanderthals were sophisticated beings with brains actually larger on average than those of modern humans. They were powerfully built, with robust skeletons, adapted to the harsh conditions of Ice Age Europe. Their distinctive features included prominent brow ridges, a projecting face, and a barrel-shaped chest that may have been an adaptation to cold climates. Neanderthals were master toolmakers, creating sophisticated implements using a technique called the Lival method, which required considerable planning and skill. They controlled fire, built shelters, and cared for their sick and elderly. Evidence suggests they may have had a form of language, and even engaged in symbolic behavior, including the creation of cave art and the use of pigments for body decoration. They buried their dead, sometimes with grave goods, indicating a complex understanding of death, and possibly an early form of religious or spiritual belief. The Neanderthal way of life was intimately connected to the rhythms of Ice Age Europe. They hunted large game like mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, and cave bears, using sophisticated hunting strategies that required coordination and communication. They lived in small, closely knit groups and had extensive knowledge of their local environments. including the properties of different plants and minerals. In the remote Denisova cave in Siberia, scientists made one of the most remarkable discoveries in the history of human evolution. From a tiny fragment of a pinky bone and a few teeth, they identified an entirely new species of human. What made this discovery extraordinary was that the Denisovans were identified primarily through their DNA rather than their physical remains. Genetic analysis revealed that they were a sister group to the Neanderthals, having diverged from a common ancestor around 400,000 years ago. The Denisovans appear to have been widespread across Asia, with genetic evidence suggesting they lived from Siberia to Southeast Asia and possibly even into Oceania. They interbred with both Neanderthals and early modern humans, leaving traces of their DNA in present-day populations, particularly among people of Asian and Melanesian descent. Some populations in Papua New Guinea carry as much as 5% Denisovan DNA, indicating extensive interbreeding between these species. On the Indonesian island of Flores, archaeologists uncovered evidence of perhaps the most unusual human species of all, Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbits, due to their diminutive stature. These humans stood only about 3 feet tall and had brains roughly the size of a child. Yet they made sophisticated stone tools and successfully hunted the island's endemic fauna, including dwarf elephants and giant lizards. The existence of Homo floresiensis challenged many assumptions about human evolution. Their small brain size suggested that large brains were not necessarily required for complex behavior and tool-making. Their island habitat had apparently led to evolutionary dwarfism, a common phenomenon among island populations. Most remarkably, they survived until relatively recently, with the youngest fossils dating to about 50,000 years ago, meaning they coexisted with modern humans. In South Africa, the discovery of Homo naledi added another branch to the human family tree. These humans had a unique combination of primitive and modern features, with small brains but human-like hands and feet. What made Homo naledi particularly intriguing was evidence suggesting they may have deliberately disposed of their dead in a remote cave chamber, a behavior previously thought to be unique to more advanced human species. The genetic revolution of the early 21st century revealed that the relationships between these various human species were far more complex than previously imagined. Rather than existing in isolation, these different human populations regularly encountered each other, sometimes competing, sometimes cooperating, and sometimes interbreeding. The DNA of modern humans carries traces of these ancient encounters, with most people of non-African descent carrying 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA, and many Asians and Melanesians also carrying Denisovan genetic material. This genetic legacy tells a story of a world where different types of humans not only coexisted, but also formed relationships with each other. They didn't just fight, they sometimes lived together, shared knowledge, and even fell in love. The boundaries between species were more fluid than we might expect, and the story of human evolution is as much about cooperation and integration as it is about competition and replacement. The diversity of human species during this period also reveals the incredible adaptability of the human lineage. Each species represented a different solution to the challenges of survival in specific environments. The robust Neanderthals thrived in the cold climates of Europe. The Denisovans adapted to the varied landscapes of Asia. The Flores hobbits succeeded on their isolated island, and various African species continued to evolve in the continent where humanity first emerged. Approximately 300,000 years ago, in the ancient landscapes of Africa, a new species of human emerged that would eventually come to dominate the planet. Homo sapiens. The earliest fossils of our species have been found at sites like Jebel Herhad in Morocco and Omo Kibish in Ethiopia. revealing that modern humans appeared much earlier than previously thought and across a broader geographic range within Africa. What made Homo sapiens different from their contemporaries was not immediately obvious from their physical remains. Early Homo sapiens were not dramatically larger-brained than Neanderthals, nor were they necessarily more robust than other human species. The key differences lay in the subtle reorganization of the brain and the emergence of cognitive capabilities that would prove to be revolutionary. The Homo sapiens brain was uniquely wired for language, symbolism, and abstract thinking. While other human species likely had some form of communication, Homo sapiens developed language systems of unprecedented complexity and flexibility. This wasn't just about making sounds to convey immediate needs. It was about the ability to discuss abstract concepts, share complex ideas, and transmit detailed information across generations. Language allowed Homo sapiens to do something that no other species had achieved. They could share not just information about the physical world, but also stories, beliefs, and cultural knowledge. They could discuss things that didn't exist in the immediate environment, plan for future events, and learn from the experiences of others without having to live through those experiences themselves. This capacity for symbolic thought and communication created a new form of evolution. Cultural evolution, which could proceed much faster than biological evolution. The archaeological record shows that around 70,000 years ago, something remarkable happened in human development that archaeologists call the cognitive revolution. This wasn't a sudden biological change, but rather the full flowering of capabilities that had been developing for tens of thousands of years. Humans began creating sophisticated art, including the famous cave paintings of Europe and the rock art of Australia and Africa. They developed complex tools, including composite implements made from multiple materials, and began using symbols and ornaments that served no practical purpose other than communication and self-expression. This period saw the emergence of what we might recognize as fully modern human behavior. People began burying their dead with elaborate grave goods, suggesting complex beliefs about death and possibly an afterlife. They created jewelry and body ornaments, indicating a sense of personal and group identity. They developed sophisticated hunting techniques and began exploiting marine resources, expanding their dietary range and allowing populations to grow. The cognitive revolution also marked the beginning of human mythology and storytelling. For the first time, humans could create shared narratives that bound large groups together. They could believe in common myths, follow shared moral codes, and cooperate in groups much larger than those possible through direct personal relationships. This ability to create and believe in shared fictions, whether religious, political, or cultural, became one of humanity's greatest strengths, allowing for unprecedented levels of social cooperation. Music and dance also emerged during this period, as evidenced by the discovery of bone flutes and other musical instruments. These activities served no obvious survival function, but were clearly important to early human communities. They may have played a role in social bonding, mate selection, and the transmission of cultural information. The human capacity for aesthetic appreciation and creative expression set our species apart from all others. The development of more sophisticated tools during this period reflected not just improved manual dexterity, but also enhanced planning abilities and understanding of cause and effect. Humans began creating tools for making other tools, demonstrating a level of abstract thinking that required the ability to envision multiple steps into the future. They developed specialized tools for different tasks and began trading materials over long distances, indicating complex social networks and economic relationships. Perhaps most importantly, Homo sapiens developed an unprecedented capacity for innovation and adaptation. While other human species had successfully adapted to specific environments, Homo sapiens showed an ability to rapidly modify their behavior and technology to succeed in virtually any environment. This flexibility would prove crucial as they began to spread beyond Africa and encounter new challenges and opportunities. The social organization of early Homo sapiens also appears to have been more complex than that of other human species. Evidence suggests they lived in larger groups and had more extensive networks of cooperation and exchange. They developed systems of leadership, conflict resolution, and resource sharing that allowed them to maintain social cohesion even as group sizes increased. By around 100,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had become the dominant human species in Africa. Though they had not yet begun their major expansion into other continents, they had developed all the cognitive and cultural capabilities that would eventually allow them to spread across the globe and become the only surviving human species. The stage was set for one of the most remarkable journeys in the history of life on Earth. Roughly 60,000 years ago, small groups of Homo sapiens began to undertake one of the most consequential journeys in human history, the migration out of Africa that would eventually populate the entire globe. This was not the first time humans had left Africa. Homo erectus had made that journey nearly 2 million years earlier. But this migration would be different. These modern humans carried with them the full suite of cognitive and cultural capabilities that had emerged during the preceding millennia, and they would use these abilities to adapt to and transform every environment they encountered. The initial migration likely began during a period of favorable climate conditions, when lower sea levels created land bridges and corridors that made travel easier. The first groups probably followed the coastlines of the Arabian Peninsula and the Indian Ocean, taking advantage of marine resources and the relatively stable coastal environments. Archaeological evidence suggests that these early migrants reached Australia by at least 50,000 years ago, a journey that required sophisticated boat-building technology and navigation skills. As there was never a complete land bridge to that continent, the migration was not a single mass movement, but rather a series of smaller expansions over thousands of years. Groups would settle in favorable locations, their populations would grow, and then some members would move on to explore new territories. This process of expansion, settlement, and further expansion created a wave of human colonization that gradually spread across the Old World and eventually into the Americas. As these early humans moved into new environments, they encountered challenges that no human species had faced before. In the northern latitudes of Europe and Asia, they had to adapt to harsh winter conditions and seasonal variations in food availability. They developed new hunting strategies, created warm clothing from animal skins, and learned to build substantial shelters. The famous cave paintings of Europe, created between 40,000 and 10,000 years ago, provide a window into the lives of these ice-aged hunters and their sophisticated understanding of animal behavior. In the tropical forests of Southeast Asia, migrants had to develop entirely different survival strategies. They learned to exploit the resources of dense jungle environments, including a wide variety of plants, insects, and small animals. They created tools, adapted to forest life, and developed techniques for processing toxic plants to make them edible. The diversity of human cultures that emerged in these regions reflects the creative solutions that different groups developed for similar environmental challenges. The journey to Australia represents one of the most remarkable achievements of early human migration. Even at the lowest sea levels, reaching Australia required crossing at least 90 kilometers of open ocean. This meant that the first Australians must have possessed sophisticated boat-building technology and navigation skills. Once they arrived, they encountered a continent filled with unique fauna, including giant marsupials and reptiles. Within a few thousand years of human arrival, Many of these large animals had gone extinct, possibly due to hunting pressure or environmental changes caused by human activities such as fire management. The colonization of Europe brought Homo sapiens into direct contact with Neanderthals, who had been living there for hundreds of thousands of years. For several millennia, these two human species coexisted in the same regions, sometimes competing for resources, and sometimes in. The genetic evidence shows that this interaction was not simply one of conflict and replacement, but involved complex relationships that included cooperation and cultural exchange. The migration into northern Asia and eventually across the Bering land bridge into the Americas represents the final major phase of human global expansion. Groups adapted to the extreme conditions of the Arctic, developed sophisticated technologies for hunting marine mammals and surviving in environments where temperatures could drop far below freezing for months at a time. Their descendants would eventually populate both North and South America, adapting to environments ranging from tropical rainforests to high-altitude mountains to desert regions. Each new environment that humans encountered required innovations in technology, social organization, and cultural practices. The diversity of human cultures that emerged during this period of expansion reflects the remarkable adaptability of our species. Groups developed different languages, belief systems, artistic traditions, and survival strategies, yet all remained fundamentally human, sharing the same basic cognitive capabilities and social needs. The genetic legacy of these ancient migrations can still be read in the DNA of modern populations. People whose ancestors remained in Africa show the greatest genetic diversity, reflecting the long history of human evolution on that continent. Populations whose ancestors migrated to other continents show patterns of genetic variation that reflect the roots and timing of ancient migrations. The further from Africa a population's ancestors travel, the less genetic diversity they typically show, reflecting the founder effects of small migrating groups. This great migration also established the foundation for all subsequent human history. The populations that spread across the globe during this period would eventually develop agriculture, build cities, create complex societies, and ultimately reshape the entire planet. Every human alive today can trace their ancestry back to these early migrants, who had the courage and ingenuity to explore unknown territories and adapt to new challenges. The success of this migration was not guaranteed. Many groups probably failed, unable to adapt to new environments or overcome the challenges they encountered, but enough succeeded to establish viable populations on every habitable continent, creating the global human presence that characterizes our species today. This expansion represents one of the most successful colonization events in the history of life on Earth. Achieved not through biological adaptation over millions of years, but through cultural innovation and behavioral flexibility over just a few tens of thousands of years. As Homo sapiens spread across the globe and established themselves in diverse environments, a profound change was taking place in the story of human evolution. The rich diversity of human species that had characterized the Middle Pleistocene was beginning to disappear. One by one, our ancient cousins vanished from the fossil record, leaving Homo sapiens as the sole surviving member of the human family. This process of extinction and survival would fundamentally reshape the nature of humanity and set the stage for everything that followed. The Neanderthals were among the last of our close relatives to disappear. For thousands of years, they had successfully adapted to the challenging environments of Ice Age Europe, developing sophisticated technologies and complex social behaviors. Yet around 40,000 years ago, Neanderthal populations began to decline, and by 28,000 years ago, they had vanished entirely. The reasons for their extinction remain a subject of intense scientific debate, but several factors likely contributed to their demise. Climate change played a significant role in the fate of the Neanderthals. The period around 40,000 years ago was marked by increasing climatic instability, with rapid fluctuations between warm and cold conditions. These changes would have disrupted the ecosystems that Neanderthals depended upon, making their traditional hunting strategies less effective, and forcing them to compete for dwindling resources. The arrival of Homo sapiens in Europe also coincided with the decline of Neanderthal populations, suggesting that competition between the two species may have been a factor. Homo sapiens possessed certain advantages, including more sophisticated tools, more complex social networks, and possibly superior communication abilities. They may have been more efficient hunters or better able to exploit a wider range of resources, giving them a competitive edge in times of environmental stress. However, the relationship between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens was not simply one of competition and replacement. Genetic evidence clearly shows that the two species with most modern humans of known African descent carrying 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. This suggests that at least some Neanderthal populations were absorbed into expanding Homo sapiens groups, rather than simply being displaced by them. In a sense, the Neanderthals did not completely disappear. They became part of us. The Denisovans, known primarily from their genetic legacy rather than their fossils, also disappeared during this period. Like the Neanderthals, they left traces of their DNA in modern human populations, particularly among people of Asian and Melanesian descent. The high percentage of Denisovan DNA in some populations suggests that interbreeding between Denisovans and Homo sapiens was extensive in certain regions. The disappearance of Homo floresiensis, the hobbits of Indonesia, occurred more recently, with the youngest fossils dating to around 50,000 years ago. Air extinction may have been related to volcanic activity on their island home, or it may have resulted from the arrival of modern humans in the region. The isolated nature of their island environment, which had protected them for so long, may have made them particularly vulnerable to new pressures. Other human species, including various African forms, like Homo, also disappeared during this period, though the timing and causes of their extinctions are less well understood. What is clear is that by around 30,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had become the only surviving human species on Earth, ending millions of years of human diversity. The reasons for the survival of Homo sapiens, while other human species went extinct, are complex and multifaceted. Our species possessed several key advantages that proved crucial during this period of environmental and social upheaval. The sophisticated language abilities of Homo sapiens allowed for more effective communication and coordination. This enhanced social organization provided advantages in both competition and cooperation, allowing Homo sapiens groups to outcompete other species, while also facilitating the sharing of innovations and resources. The cultural capabilities of Homo sapiens also proved to be a decisive advantage. While other human species had cultures and technologies, Homo sapiens showed an unprecedented ability to innovate and adapt their behaviors to new situations. They could rapidly develop new tools, hunting strategies, and survival techniques as they encountered new environments and challenges. This behavioral flexibility allowed them to succeed in a wider range of environments than any other human species. The ability of Homo sapiens to form extensive social networks and engage in long-distance trade provided significant advantages. These networks allowed for the sharing of resources, information, and innovations across large geographic areas. When local populations faced difficulties, they could receive support from distant relatives or trading partners. This interconnectedness made Homo sapiens populations more resilient to local disasters and environmental changes. Perhaps most importantly, Homo sapiens developed the ability to modify their environments rather than simply adapting to them. They used fire to manage landscapes, hunted large animals to extinction, and began the process of domesticating plants and animals. This environmental manipulation gave them a degree of control over their circumstances that other species lacked, allowing them to create more stable and productive living conditions. The extinction of other human species also had profound implications for the survivors. Homo sapiens became the sole inheritors of millions of years of human evolutionary history. All the genetic diversity, cultural knowledge, and adaptive strategies that had been distributed among multiple human species were now concentrated in a single lineage. This created both opportunities and vulnerabilities that would shape the future of our species. The survival of Homo sapiens also meant that certain evolutionary trajectories were foreclosed, while others became possible. The robust build of the Neanderthals, the small stature of Homo floresiensis, and the unique adaptations of other human species represented alternative paths that human evolution might have taken. With their extinction, these possibilities were lost, and the future of humanity became tied to the specific characteristics and capabilities of Homo sapiens. Yet the genetic legacy of our extinct relatives lives on within us. The Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA that modern humans carry represents a form of evolutionary insurance, providing genetic variants that may prove useful in future challenges. Some of these ancient genetic variants have already been shown to influence modern human traits, including immune system function, adaptation to high altitude, and response to certain diseases. The story of human origins is far from over. While we have learned an enormous amount about where we came from in the past century and a half of scientific investigation, new discoveries continue to reshape our understanding of human evolution and our place in the natural world. Each new fossil find, each advance in genetic analysis, and each breakthrough in archaeological techniques adds new chapters to the story of how we became human. Recent discoveries have revealed that human evolution was far more complex than previously imagined. The human family tree is not a simple linear progression, but a complex branching network with multiple species coexisting, interbreeding, and competing across millions of years. We now know that our ancestors shared the world with a remarkable diversity of other human species, each representing a different experiment in what it meant to be human. The genetic revolution has provided unprecedented insights into our evolutionary history. By analyzing DNA from both modern populations and ancient remains, scientists can trace the movements of our ancestors across the globe, identify periods of population growth and decline, and even detect evidence of interbreeding between different human species. This genetic record has revealed that the story of human evolution is not just about biological change, but also about cultural innovation, migration, and adaptation. Archaeological discoveries continue to push back the dates for various human achievements. We now know that our ancestors were creating art, using symbols, and engaging in complex behaviors much earlier than previously thought. The discovery of ancient tools, cave paintings, and burial sites provides glimpses into the minds and lives of our ancestors, revealing their creativity, intelligence, and humanity. The study of human origins also has profound implications for understanding ourselves and our future. By learning about the challenges our ancestors faced and how they overcame them, we can gain insights into human nature, our capacity for adaptation, and our potential for both cooperation and conflict. The story of human evolution is ultimately a story about survival, innovation, and the power of culture to shape biological destiny. As we face the challenges of the modern world, from climate change to technological disruption to social inequality, the lessons of human evolution remain relevant. Our ancestors survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and mass extinctions through their ability to adapt, innovate, and cooperate. They spread across the globe and thrived in every environment on Earth. Through their flexibility, creativity, and determination, the story of human origins also reminds us of our deep connection to all life on Earth. We are not separate from nature but part of it, shaped by the same evolutionary processes that have created all living things. Our closest relatives, the other great apes, share with us a common ancestor that lived just a few million years ago. Our more distant relatives include every living thing on the planet, connected to us through billions of years of evolutionary history. Understanding our origins also provides perspective on human diversity and unity. All modern humans, regardless of their geographic origin or physical appearance, share a common ancestry that can be traced back to Africa within the last few 100,000 years. The genetic differences between human populations are tiny compared to the similarities we all share. We are, in the most literal sense, one human family. The story of human origins is also a story about the power of scientific inquiry to reveal truth about the natural world. The methods of science, careful observation, hypothesis testing, and peer review have allowed us to reconstruct events that happened millions of years ago and to understand processes that operate over time scales far beyond human experience. This scientific understanding of our origins provides a foundation for making informed decisions about our future. As we continue to explore our origins, new questions emerge. How did consciousness arise? What role did cooperation versus competition play in human evolution? How did language develop? What can we learn from our extinct relatives? How will human evolution continue in the future? These questions drive ongoing research and ensure that the story of human origins will continue to evolve as our knowledge grows. The dawn of humanity was not a single moment, but a long process of change, adaptation, and innovation that continues today. We are still evolving, still adapting, still innovating, the same qualities that allowed our ancestors to survive and thrive. Curiosity, creativity, cooperation, and adaptability remain our greatest assets as we face the challenges and opportunities of the future. In understanding where we came from, we gained insight into who we are and who we might become. The story of human origins is ultimately our story, the story of how a small group of African primates became the dominant species on Earth and began to reach for the stars. It is a story of triumph over adversity, of intelligence over instinct, of culture over biology. It is the story of us, and it is still being written. The story of humanity isn't a straight line. It's a tapestry of survival, extinction, and transformation. And it's still being written. So if you want to hear the next chapter, hit that subscribe button, because I'll tell you what happened is far from done.